My sister pushed the papers across my grandmother's dining table hard enough to knock the salt over. 22 pages, clipped, still warm from a printer. On top of them, a pen she had already uncapped for me. "Top one and the last one," she said. "The rest is boilerplate." I read the top one. Consent of interested party to sale of the protected person's real property. I read the last one. A deed releasing my share of the house we were sitting in. The quarter my grandfather left me in a will that has been sitting in the Henrico County Clerk's office since 2019. "Danielle," I said, "you want me to sign the house away while we're eating in it?" My sister is 35. She kept her married name, Vance, after the divorce, and she is the reason I don't work anymore. She'd brought a lawyer with her, a man in a golf shirt she'd put on the clock for a 40-minute Sunday drive, billing the estate she was appointed to protect. He was eating my grandmother's pot roast, off my grandmother's plates, 4 feet from my grandmother's chair. The chair at the head of the table. Nobody had set a place at it. Nobody had moved it, either. "Be realistic," Danielle said. And she said it to the lawyer instead of to me. She lives in 600 square feet behind a transmission shop. What is she going to do with a house? Then, to me. And don't get precious about it. Nobody ends up on a state list for nothing. 600 square feet behind a transmission shop. The apartment I moved into the same month her phone call took my AIDS certification off me. I set my fork down so it wouldn't tap the plate. Then I read the packet again. Slower. The second time I wasn't reading. I was counting how many times their paperwork leaned on that finding to hold itself up. Page 3. Page 7. Exhibit A, twice. 7 times, by the end. Our father sat at the other end of the table and buttered a roll. "Before I sign anything," I said, "can I have an unsigned copy of the whole packet? You can have this one after. I'd like my own." I looked at the lawyer. "And I'd like the case number written down and the exhibit list. Whatever's attached, I want to see the list of what's attached." I didn't raise my voice. I don't. Anymore. There is a visitor list at a memory care building in Glen Allen with exactly one name on it that can add mine, and that name was sitting across from me holding out a pen. Everything I have wanted to say for over a year has been sitting behind that list, waiting. There is a hearing on Tuesday the 18th. Before that room clears out, somebody at this table is going to have to say a number out loud. It is not going to be me. The lawyer turned the packet toward himself and went down the tabs on the side, one at a time, with a thumb. He went down them twice. "Ms. Vance," he said, "could I have a word on the porch?" They were out there 4 minutes. I could hear the porch boards through the wall. One set of shoes moving, one set not. He came back in alone. He didn't sit down. He closed the packet, squared it, and slid it into his briefcase. All of it, including the copy she'd laid in front of me. He clicked the latches. Then he looked at me, and he was careful about it. The way people are careful when they've decided to stop being paid. "Ms. Dillard," he said, "I'd advise you not to sign anything tonight." And he left the pen on the table. My sister came in a full minute after him. She didn't sit either. Out on the driveway, a car door shut. And then nothing. No engine. For a long time. The roast went cold in the middle of the table with 4 plates around it, one of them abandoned, and one chair that nobody would look at. He'd walked past my grandmother's rocking chair twice that night, out on the porch, and never once looked down at it. It's still out there. It's still wrapped in the nylon somebody taped over it 14 months ago, and to understand why nobody has ever taken that nylon off, you have to go back to a Tuesday in June of last year, and a phone call that lasted 11 minutes. 6 days before that dinner, on Monday the 3rd of August, an envelope came to the apartment behind the transmission shop. State seal. Embossed. The kind you can feel with a thumb before you ever open it. I'm not going to tell you yet what was in it. Here is what I will tell you instead. By Sunday night, page 7 of that man's petition was standing on something that had stopped existing on Monday morning. So was Exhibit A. Both times it showed up in his list. So was the paragraph on page 3 that explained to a judge, in careful language, why a granddaughter with a certain kind of finding beside her name did not need to be told anything. That is what he was looking for when he went down those tabs. The first pass, he was checking. The second pass, he was hunting for anything else in the packet that could hold it upright without that finding underneath. There was nothing. 22 pages, and every load-bearing beam ran through one line about me that had been true for 13 months and was not true anymore. He asked my sister onto the porch, and 4 minutes later he came back in and took his own filing off the table. My name is Tony Dillard. I'm 29 years old, and I spent most of my 20s bathing other people's grandmothers for $14 an hour, so I want to say one thing before we go back to that Tuesday in June. If you have ever had somebody with a title decide what kind of person you are, and then watched every door in your life lock from the outside on their say-so, stay with me through this. And if there's somebody you've stopped calling because you assumed they stopped wanting to hear from you, tell me in the comments. I have a reason for asking, and you'll understand it by the end. There is a number in all of this that nobody has said out loud yet. 9 days after that dinner, in a room on the 3rd floor of the Henrico County Courthouse, a woman in a black robe is going to read it off a page. My sister is going to be standing up when she does. The Tuesday was the 10th of June, last year, and I was standing in my grandmother's kitchen on Kenmore Road with a pill organizer open in front of me. 5 days a week for 3 years I was in that kitchen. I had my AIDS certification, and my grandmother had a bad hip, early vascular dementia, and a horror of being handled by strangers. So it was me. Baths, blood pressure, the Tuesday pharmacy run, the utility bills stacked by due date on the sideboard. Danielle lived 20 minutes north in Short Pump with a master's degree and a clinical license and a caseload of other families. And she came at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and she took photos of the plates. That morning, she was on speaker on the counter while I sorted Thursday. I looked at the account online, she said. $3,200 is gone out of it since spring. I know, I've got the receipts in the drawer. Tony, roofman, plumber, and the dental thing. They're in the drawer, Danielle. Come look at them. There was a pause on her end with an office sound behind it. A door closing. She was in a building where she knew what everything was called. I already called somebody, she said. I asked who. She said the county. I asked what she'd told them, and she said what she'd tell any family in her position. And then she said the line she has kept saying for 14 months in one form or another. To me, to the court, to a judge's clerk in writing under oath. My sister took money out of my grandmother's account, so I had no choice but to protect her. 11 minutes. I stayed on the whole time, and I never once raised my voice, because in that kitchen, my grandmother could hear everything through the wall. I hung up and I finished Thursday, then Friday. Then I put the organizer back on the shelf where she could reach it. She had it wrong by one word, and it took me a year to prove which one. The notice came on the 8th of July in a windowed envelope, addressed to me at Kenmore Road. Finding: misappropriation of resident property. Amount: $3,200. Disposition: substantiated. 2 paragraphs down, the part that mattered. The finding would be annotated on the Virginia Nurse Aid Registry, and under federal law that annotation does not come off. Not in 5 years. Not in 20. I read it standing in the driveway. Then I drove to Ashland Meadows for my shift, and I worked it, because nobody there had opened their mail yet. They had by Thursday. My scheduler cried. The administrator did not, and I didn't hold it against her. A licensed facility that puts an annotated aid on a hall can lose its certification, and she had 91 residents. 48 hours from the postmark, my badge went into the punch and came back out with a hole through my face. I still have it. Bottom of the kitchen drawer, under the takeout menus. I don't look at it, but I know exactly where it is, the way you know where a bad tooth is with your tongue. The rest went fast, the way it does. Home Health Agency, same registry, same answer. Private duty clients, Their families ran the check. 600 square feet behind a transmission shop, third shift picking at a food distribution warehouse where the freezer aisle runs 34 degrees, hotel rooms on the weekends. $14 became $11.50 and then became whatever the shift paid. People ask why I didn't fight louder that summer. Here's why. By then my grandmother was in a memory care building in Glen Allen with a locked visitor list, and there was exactly one name on that list with the authority to add another. Every loud thing I could have done that July would have been done at my grandmother's expense, and the person holding the door was the person I'd be yelling at. So I got quiet. There is a difference between quiet and finished, and my sister has never learned it. The last call came on a Wednesday from a woman named Denise about her father. Walter Prewitt is 89. 2 mornings a week for 2 years I did his shave, his shower chair, his compression socks, and the blood thinner he will not take unless somebody counts it into his hand. Private duty, no agency, a check on the kitchen table. Denise had my number from a magnet on their refrigerator. She started with how sorry she was. Then she said her brother in Charlotte had run my name through the state's lookup, the free one, the one anybody can use from a phone in a parking lot, and it came back with the annotation on it. He says if anything happened, the homeowners wouldn't cover it, she said. He says it's a liability thing. I said I understood, because I did. I would have run the same check on somebody coming into my mother's house. Behind her, I could hear him. He has a voice that carries through a wall and a phone at the same time. Who is that? Is that Tony? Tell her Thursday's fine. She put her hand over the receiver. It doesn't help. I told her to tell him I had a scheduling conflict. That's the exact phrase I used, standing in a stairwell that smelled like somebody's dinner, to a woman who was going to have to explain it to an 89-year-old man who would spend the next month asking about Thursday. That call cost me $240 a week. It is not the reason I remember the date. I remember it because that was the first time I understood the shape of what she'd done. She hadn't taken a job from me. She'd taken every door in a 100-mile radius all at once, using nothing but a phone call and 11 minutes. The 25th of July, I stood at the counter of the post office on Staples Mill with 2 things. The first was an appeal. The window to contest that finding is 30 days, and I had 5 of them left when I finally understood that nobody was going to walk it back out of decency. Certified, return receipt. So nobody could tell a hearing officer it never arrived. The second was a birthday card. She'd turned 84 on the 6th. It was 3 weeks late, and I'd rewritten it 4 times, and the version that went in was 6 sentences long and mentioned nothing about lawyers because she doesn't need my week. She needs to know somebody's coming. The clerk asked how I wanted it. Certified, I said. Then, while she was tearing the green slip, and can I get a plain one too? Same letter, second copy, regular stamp. She looked up. Same address? Same address. So I bought 2 stamps for 1 letter, and I want to be honest about why, because at the time it wasn't a plan. Certified mail has to be signed for, and a certified letter you refuse comes back to you with the refusal stamped on the front. Plain mail doesn't come back. Plain mail just goes in, and whatever happens to it, happens where you can't see. I wanted one that would tell me the truth, and one that might actually reach her. Walking out to the car, I said something out loud to nobody, and it's the closest thing to a decision I made that whole year. I stopped asking people to believe me. I started building a file. The informal fact-finding conference was the 14th of October, in a state office off Broad Street with a folding table and a pitcher of water nobody touched. I wore the shirt I ironed on my bed. I brought the receipts from the drawer. Roofer, plumber, oral surgeon, all 3 with my grandmother's name on the invoice, and none of them with mine. I had a folder with tabs. I'd practiced in the car. My sister attended by telephone. That's allowed. The hearing officer set a cell phone in the middle of the table, and my sister's voice came out of it from wherever she was. And she was not sworn, because at that stage, nobody is. She spoke for a little under 4 minutes. She used the phrase pattern of concern. She used the word herself twice. She'd been concerned for herself, she said, meaning my grandmother, and the officer wrote it down. Nobody asked her a single question about the dates. 12 minutes after we started, the finding was affirmed as issued. The officer was not unkind. She told me my remedy was to request a formal hearing, in writing, and that, at a formal hearing, there is a record and there is testimony, and the agency has to put its evidence on the table. I requested it at the counter on my way out. I also asked, in writing, for the complete investigative file. That same week, envelope number 4 came back to my mailbox. Somebody had run it through a stamp at the facility. Purple ink, slightly crooked across my own handwriting. Refused by addressee. The file came in a padded mailer in November. 60 pages, redacted in long black bars, half of it forms about forms. Page 38 was a bank printout. $3,200 had left my grandmother's checking account on the 26th of June. Not in spring, not in pieces. One transfer, one day, and the intake report that started all of this was dated the 7th of July. 11 days. My sister called the county about money that had gone missing 11 days earlier and told them she'd noticed it slipping away since spring. She had online access. She'd had it since the year we split the roof repair. The receiving account was masked. Last 4 digits only. I sat on the floor of a 600-square-foot apartment with my back against the dishwasher and scrolled up 3 years of text messages until I found the one where she'd sent me her account details so I could send my half of the roof. Same 4 digits. The investigator had that printout. It was in her own file, page 38, and she had gathered it and never once asked whose account it landed in. I didn't call anybody. I want to be exact about that, because it's the part people find strange. I photographed page 38, wrote the date in the corner, and put it in a shoebox on the shelf above the coats. I had learned something that October that I hadn't known in June. Knowing a thing and being allowed to say it are 2 different animals, and only one of them has teeth. The 6th of every month, I mailed 2 envelopes. I numbered both copies in the corner before I sealed them. That was the shape of it by winter. Certified plus plain, same letter twice, and the green return receipt stapled inside the lid of the shoebox when the certified one came back with its purple stamp. Number 4, number 5, number 6. I wrote about small things on purpose. The warehouse cat, the man at the laundromat who does crosswords in pen, the weather, always the weather, because she likes to know what it's doing outside a window she can't reach. In January, my father called me for 90 seconds from Danville. "She's your sister," he said. "She's got the training. Let her handle the paperwork end of it." I asked him what paperwork he'd signed. "Nothing much. She brought some things by last summer. It was just paperwork, Tony." He said that phrase like a man putting a coat over something. I let it go. He is 63 years old, and he lost his wife in a hospital he still won't drive past, and I have never once known him to read a page before signing it. That night I wrote envelope number 7 and got to the second paragraph before I put the pen down. I had been writing to my grandmother every month for half a year. $60 of stamps, 7 letters, 1 shoebox. And I had not one piece of evidence that she knew a single one of them existed. You can love somebody in a direction. That doesn't mean anything arrives. The guardianship file is public. It took me 8 months to think of that. Second floor of the Henrico County Courthouse, clerk's office, a counter with a bell. I gave the woman my grandmother's name and she came back with a folder thick enough to need both hands, and she pointed me at a table by the window and said, I couldn't take it out of the room. The petition was filed in July of the year before. Emergency appointment of guardian and conservator, person and estate. There's a section in the middle where the petitioner has to list every adult relative entitled to notice with an address for each. It's not a courtesy. It's the reason the notice requirement exists at all. My father, Ray Dillard, Danville, full street address. 1 daughter, Danielle Vance, petitioner. And nothing else. No third line. I turned the page over in case it ran, and it didn't run. Further down, in a paragraph about diligent inquiry, My sister had certified to the court that the protected person's other granddaughter was believed to have relocated and that a current address was unknown. Unknown. I was standing at that table with an electric bill folded in my jacket pocket, and my address was printed on it, and it is 12 miles from her office. She sent me a Christmas card the December before with that address handwritten on the front of it. I put the folder back on the counter and asked what a certified copy of the entire file would run. The woman told me it was 50 cents a page and it would take her until Friday. I paid for all of it. That's the thing about a lie written down under a signature. It doesn't get tired, and it doesn't get to change its story later. It sits in a folder with a bell on the counter, waiting for the one person nobody notified to come ask for it. Behind the petition, attached as an exhibit, was the capacity evaluation. 1 page. A nurse practitioner from a mobile assessment service, signed, dated 3 weeks before the hearing. Under duration of examination, 20 minutes. 20 minutes to move a woman's whole life into somebody else's hands. The narrative section had 4 sentences. The 4th one said the patient was unable to identify family members. I read it standing up. Then I sat down and read it again with my phone in my hand, because I keep everything, and because 4 days after the date on that evaluation, my grandmother and I were on a video call for 41 minutes. I still have the screenshot. Her in the recliner with the Afghan over her knees, the call timer running in the corner. On that call, she asked whether I'd started the Tuesday pharmacy run yet that week, and told me the sweet potatoes were terrible this year, and called me by my name 11 or 12 times, because she has never once in her life used a pronoun when she could use a name. Her memory came in weather. Some days were fog, and some days were glass. And anybody who spent 5 days a week in that kitchen knew which was which. By the way, she said hello. A stranger with a clipboard in 20 minutes doesn't get told the difference. A stranger with a clipboard gets whatever the daughter in the hallway has already told her to expect. That evaluation is the hinge the whole thing swings on. Remove it and there's no emergency, no appointment, no locked list. And it changed the question I'd been carrying since June. I had been lying awake asking whether my grandmother still remembered me. Wrong question. Sitting at that window table, I finally had the right one. What has she been told about me? In February, my grandmother called me. Not really. An aide dialed it for her. A new one who didn't know the rules yet. And the number she read off was the one my grandmother has had in a book by her chair since I was in high school. 40 seconds. Tony, it's your grandma. I was standing in the warehouse parking lot with my coat half on. I said her name back and I heard her breathe. And then she said the thing I have replayed more times than anything else in this story. Why didn't you stay up in Ohio, honey? Aunt Loretta says it's cold up there. You could have waited for spring. My Aunt Loretta is my father's sister and she has lived in Dayton since before I was born. And I have never lived anywhere but Virginia. I have never spent a night in Ohio. I was, at that moment, 19 minutes from the building my grandmother was calling me from. I didn't correct her. You don't argue with a woman on a good day about a fact somebody planted on a bad one, not in 40 seconds, not on a borrowed phone. So I told her it was cold here too. I told her the crocuses were up along the fence at the laundromat. She laughed at something I said, and then she said she had to go. They were doing hymns. Envelope number 7 had come back that week with the purple stamp on it. It was on the counter when I got home. I turned it over and wrote the date on the back, and under the date I wrote the word Ohio, and then the line went dead in my hand with that 3-tone chime the system uses when somebody hangs up at a switchboard. In March she filed to sell the house. I know because I got a copy in the mail from the clerk, 4 days after I paid for one, and I read it on the tailgate of my car outside the warehouse at 6 in the morning. The petition to sell real estate laid it out for the judge like a hardship. The roof was original. The taxes ran $2,100 a year. The house sat empty and would keep sitting empty. And the protected person's care at Larkspur Ridge ran $6,800 a month, every month, forever. All of that is true. That's what makes it good. My grandmother's care did cost that. And a house with a bad roof does bleed money. And if you read only that petition, you'd think a tired daughter was doing a hard, responsible thing. Behind it was the interim accounting. Receipts? Disbursements? And then a line item I read 4 times because I thought I'd lost my place. Care coordination, 412 hours at $65 an hour. I did the arithmetic on the back of envelope number 9, which was sitting on the tailgate because I hadn't mailed it yet. 412 hours since the appointment, and the appointment was in July. 8 months. 412 hours is more than 10 straight weeks of full-time work. I had done 5 days a week for 3 years in that house, and I had never once billed a minute of it because you don't invoice your grandmother. Somewhere in an office in Short Pump, a woman with a clinical license had spent 10 full-time weeks coordinating the care of a woman she visited on holidays. It was in writing, it was signed, and it had already been paid, out of the account it was supposed to protect. I drove to Larkspur Ridge for the first time in 9 months. It's a nice building. That's the part nobody tells you. Wide halls, good light, a fish tank in the lobby, and a rack of large print crosswords, and it costs $6,800 a month, and it is worth it if the person inside gets to see anybody. The guest book sat open on a podium by the desk. Date, printed name, resident visiting, relationship, time in, time out. I looked down the page while the receptionist was on the phone. 20-some lines going back a week. Every single one had a name in it. The relationship column was empty. All of it. Top to bottom, nobody had filled in one square of that column, which told me something before I ever asked a question. That column is filled in when the desk cares who you are to the person you're seeing. The receptionist put the phone down and asked who I was here for. I said the name. She typed, and her face did the small closing thing that faces do. "I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not on Mrs. Dillard's approved list." I asked how a person gets added. She said the responsible party adds them. A badge went past behind her on a lanyard. Charmaine Ott, Activities. A CNA who had moved off the hall floor into the activities office, I learned later, the way aides do when their back goes. She was carrying a stack of paper hearts, and she looked at me on the way by, and then she looked at me a second longer than a stranger looks at a stranger, and then she went through the door with the keypad. I walked out to the lot and sat with my hands on the wheel and said one sentence out loud, and it was not about my sister. I said, "Fine, then I'll come in through the courthouse." The next week I mailed 1 page to the Commissioner of Accounts for Henrico County. If you don't know what that office is, you're in good company. Every guardian and conservator in Virginia has to file an inventory and then an annual accounting, and they don't file it with the judge. They file it with the commissioner, a lawyer the court appoints to audit fiduciaries, who has the power to demand vouchers, to summons a fiduciary in, and to report a deficiency straight to the bench. I did not write a complaint. I want to be clear about that, because it would have felt wonderful and it would have gone in a drawer. I wrote that under my grandfather's will, probated in that same courthouse in 2019, my grandmother holds a life estate in the property on Kenmore Road, and the remainder passes in 4 equal shares, and that I hold one of them. I attached the will page. I asked to be noted as an interested party and to receive copies of all inventories and accountings filed in the matter. No adjectives, no allegations, not one sentence about my sister. 6 lines and a stamp. Here's what that page did. And it did it silently for 4 months. It made me a person the file had to talk to. Everything that got filed from then on came to my mailbox by rule, not by anybody's permission, and no one had to decide to be fair to me for it to keep happening. I have been told since that it was the smartest thing I did all year. It wasn't the smartest. It was just the quietest, and quiet things are the ones nobody thinks to stop. In June, I started driving home from the night shift the long way, past the house. I don't know what I was checking. The gutters? Maybe. The mail nobody was getting. At 6:45 in the morning, Kenmore Road is all sprinklers and dog walkers, and it looks like a place where nothing has gone wrong. There was a sign in the front yard. County notice. Wire legs. The laminated kind. Public hearing on an application for a special use permit. Applicant, Halvard Group Homes LLC. Proposed use, residential care facility, 6 beds. I pulled over on the shoulder with the engine running. The county puts its planning files online. I sat in the car in my warehouse fleece and read the application on my phone with the sun coming up over the Bagby's roof, and on page 2, under applicant's interest in the property, it said lease. Effective the 1st of May, $2,450 a month. 6 weeks earlier, in a courthouse 12 miles away, my sister had told a judge that the house was an unsustainable burden that had to be sold to fund care. She was renting it. She had been renting it since the 1st of May to a company that wanted to put 6 beds in my grandmother's living room, while she wrote to a court that the property produced nothing and cost everything. I photographed the sign. I photographed the address on the sign. I photographed the file on my phone screen, which is a stupid way to keep a document, so when I got home I printed it and put it in the shoebox and wrote the date on the corner. 2 sworn things now, going opposite directions, both signed by the same hand. I did not tell one living soul. Not that week. Not for 2 months. The formal hearing was the 16th of June, at 9 in the morning, and I represented myself because a lawyer wanted $2,500 to appear, and I had $1,100 in the bank. I ironed a shirt on the bed because my board broke in the movie. The agency had counsel. He was polite. He had my file and he walked the hearing officer through it in a flat, tidy voice, and when he was done, the findings sounded like a thing that had happened rather than a thing somebody had decided. I didn't argue with any of it. I'd rehearsed arguing for 8 months in a car, and standing up in the room I understood that arguing was exactly what they were built for. Instead, I asked for their own exhibit. Page 38, the bank printout, the one out of their file. I put it on the table and turned it around so it faced the officer, and I asked one question. The withdrawal is dated the 26th of June. The complaint says money had been disappearing since spring. Can the agency point to a single transaction on this record before the 26th of June? The officer looked at the page for a while. Then she looked at counsel. He asked for a recess. They took 20 minutes. Which is a long time when you are standing in a hallway alone next to a water fountain, holding a folder with tabs you made yourself with masking tape. When we went back in, the officer said she would hold the record open for supplemental submissions and issue a written decision in due course, and she thanked me for my time. I drove home and there was a fresh envelope in the box. My handwriting. The 6th of May, number 11. Refused by addressee. Purple, crooked, across my own hand. The annual report landed on the 30th of June, and it came to me automatically because of one page I'd mailed in March. A guardian has to file a report every year with the local social services board and the court. Condition of the protected person. Living arrangements. Services provided. Signed under penalty of perjury. Services provided. 538 hours of care coordination. The interim accounting in March had said 412, 126 additional hours in 3 months, 3 months in which my grandmother's world was one hallway and one activities room, in which nothing changed about her care except the number describing it. I went to the shelf and got down the January report, the first one filed after the appointment, and I put all 3 documents in a row on the kitchen table, left to right, oldest to newest. 3 papers. 3 numbers, 3 signatures under an oath, each one requiring that the one before it be false. I made coffee I didn't drink, and stood there looking at them the way you look at a puzzle that has just gone from hard to finished. And then I did nothing. That's the part that people don't believe. I had a lie stacked 3 deep in her own handwriting in a public file in the last week of June, and I put the pages back in the shoebox and went to work the night shift. Because a hearing on a petition to sell was already docketed, and a hearing on my grandmother's care was not. A thing like that spends itself once. Spend it in June, on a Tuesday, in front of a clerk, and it becomes a letter in a drawer with somebody's initials on the corner. I wanted a room. I wanted a judge in it, and a court reporter, and my sister standing up under oath with nowhere to put her hands. I could wait. She'd been teaching me how for a year. The 6th of July, my grandmother turned 85, and I made the mistake of trying the front door. I had the card and a tin of the pecan cookies she likes, and I'd told myself a story about how a lobby is a public place, and a birthday is a birthday, and somebody would see the tin and be human about it. There were 2 other families in that lobby. A man with a little boy in a clip-on tie. A woman with balloons. Charmaine Ott came out from behind the keypad door with her badge swinging, and she did not take me down the hall or to an office. She stopped in the middle of the lobby, 6 feet away, and she pitched her voice for the room. "Ma'am, I told you before. She's been very clear she doesn't want that girl contacting her." The woman with the balloons looked at the floor. The little boy in the tie looked right at me, and for about 3 seconds I believed it. That's the bottom. Not the badge with the hole in it. Not the 600 square feet. Not the roof over my head belonging to a man who fixes transmissions. 3 seconds in a lobby with a cookie tin in my hands, believing that after 49 weeks of envelopes, my grandmother had made a choice, and the choice was not me. I said thank you, which I've thought about a lot since. I left the tin at the desk with her name on it. I went out to the car, and I sat there for 20 minutes without turning the key, and the lot got hot, and a shuttle van came and went. Then I took the notebook out of the glove box and started a list on a clean page. Names of offices, filing fees, the word petition, underlined twice. I stopped trying to get into that building. I started figuring out how to get her out of it. On the 9th of July, I filed a petition of my own. Any interested person can ask a circuit court to remove a guardian or a conservator. You do not need a lawyer and you do not need permission. You need the case number, 3 copies, and $38. I wrote it at the kitchen table over 4 nights. Not a word about how any of it felt. 4 numbered paragraphs, each one a document already in the court's own file. The notice list that left out an adult granddaughter with a known address. The 412 hours. The 538 hours. The county planning application showing a lease effective the 1st of May on a property described to the same court as unproductive. Attached as exhibits. Nothing alleged that a piece of paper didn't already say. I asked for 3 things. Removal of the fiduciary, appointment of a new guardian ad litem for my grandmother, and a full accounting, with vouchers, audited. The clerk took it at the counter at 20 past 4. I paid the filing fee in cash because I had cash. She stamped the top sheet, and the stamp made a sound like a stapler, and she said, "You'll get a hearing date in the mail." 5 days later, the court appointed a guardian ad litem, an attorney named Corinne Stull, to represent my grandmother's interests independently. That's a court's officer. She reports to the judge, not to any of us. At 4 in the afternoon on the day that order went out, my phone lit up on the passenger seat while I was backing out of the warehouse lot. Danielle, 14 months. Not for the certification, not for the birthday, not for the letters. 14 months of nothing, and now a phone ringing on a hot vinyl seat. I let it go to voicemail, and then I sat in the lot and listened to it twice, because there is information in how fast somebody's voice comes back after a year of silence. We met on Saturday the 18th of July at the coffee place next to the grocery store because she picked it. She got there first and bought me a drink I didn't ask for, and she'd done something new with her hair, and she came in with her clinical voice on. The warm one. The one that gets used on families in conference rooms after somebody's fall. "I think we both got a little dug in," she said. "I don't think you understand what this is doing to her." She said the petition was already generating letters. She said a guardian ad litem means strangers going through Grandma's chart. She said, and I've kept this one, that all of this was going to end up costing the estate more than the house was worth. I let her talk for 9 minutes. I know that because I checked the parking meter clock when I sat down and again when she stopped. Then I said what I'd driven there to say. "Show me the care log." She blinked. "The hours you billed. Itemized." "I'm not trying to burn anything down, Danielle. I want to know where the money went. Show me that, and I'll sign what your lawyer wants." Her shoulders came down about an inch. "It's a real thing, that. You can watch a person set down a weight." She said she'd have to pull it together. I said whenever. And then I said one more sentence, and it's the only thing I said in that coffee shop that I'd planned in the car. Just send it however you keep it. I don't need it made pretty. She said that was no problem at all. I held my cup with both hands going out to the lot, which is a thing I do when I need my hands to stay quiet. She thought she'd bought herself a signature for the price of a spreadsheet. I'd have paid a great deal more than that for one document my sister made herself. The summons went out from the Commissioner of Accounts on the 21st of July. I got my copy in the mail like everything else, because of one page from March. It directed the fiduciary to appear and produce a complete accounting with vouchers for every disbursement, bank statements for all accounts holding estate funds, and documentation of any income from real property. Vouchers. That's the word that does the work. Not what did you spend. Show me the receipt. The email came the next night at 11. No message in the body. One attachment. A spreadsheet. And it had never been near an accounting system in its life. You could tell from the column widths, from the fonts changing halfway down, from a row where somebody had typed a date and the software had turned it into a number, and nobody had noticed. 712 hours. She'd expanded it for me since I'd asked. A breakdown by category. And there, on its own line, 317 hours listed as on-site with the protected person. On Friday, Corinne Stull called me. A guardian ad litem investigates. And part of investigating is interviewing the person who filed the petition, so we'd been talking for 2 weeks by then. She said, in the flat way she says everything, that she had obtained the facility's visitor log under her appointment order. 41 visits, 14 months, average duration, by the log's own time in and time out columns, about 25 minutes. 17 hours. 300 hours at $65 an hour, $19,500. I printed the spreadsheet and clipped it into the shoebox with the rest of it. I did not send it to Mrs. Stoll that night. And I did not send it to the commissioner, and I did not call my father. I got the marker off the fridge and put a circle around Tuesday the 18th of August. A number like that doesn't go stale. It just has to be said in the right room. On the 28th of July, I drove to Kenmore Road to pick up my grandfather's tool chest. It's a green metal thing with his initials scratched in the lid and a cracked level inside it, and he told me when I was 14 that it was mine. It had been in the shed for 6 years. I had a spare key to the back door that I had used 5 days a week for 3 years. There was a brass padlock on the shed hasp with the price sticker still on it. $34. I was standing on the sidewalk when my phone buzzed. She has never in her life texted me back inside of a day. Set foot on that grass and I will have you charged with trespassing. I own a quarter of that grass. It has been mine since 2019. In a will. In a courthouse. And the woman who wrote that sentence had a copy of that will attached to her own petition. I didn't reply. Not one word. Not then. Not ever. I photographed the padlock. I photographed the price sticker. I photographed the county notice sign still standing in the yard with the hearing date on it, and the shed, and the number on the mailbox in the same frame so nobody could say it was some other house. Then I got in my car and drove to work. Here's the thing about a woman under a summons who spends $34 locking a co-owner out of a shed and then puts a threat in writing. She isn't defending anything. She's making my exhibits for me, on her own time, out of her own pocket. And she's doing it 4 weeks before a hearing. I have never once had to ask my sister to overplay a hand. On the 1st of August, she posted a photograph. Her page isn't private. It never has been, which tells you most of what you need to know about how visible she thinks she is. A bedroom, empty, freshly vacuumed, the carpet still showing the tracks. Caption, finally, tidy. I was in my car in the lot with 40 minutes before shift, and I sat there and pushed my fingers apart across that picture until the pixels went soft. The iron bed was gone. The inlaid dresser her mother brought from Nottoway County was gone. The photo box was gone. A hat box, actually. Cardboard, with 60 years of pictures in it and a rubber band around the outside. And in the top corner of the frame, past the window glass, out on the porch, a shape wrapped in nylon with the tape gone yellow. They'd emptied her room. Not a facility, not an estate sale with an inventory. Somebody with a truck, on a weekend, into somewhere. I saved the image. I noted the time it was posted. Then I sent it to Corinne's stall with no message attached, because a guardian ad litem does not need me to tell her what she's looking at, and because anything I wrote under it would only have made it easier to dismiss. An empty room and a caption, both of them hers. The letter came on Monday, the 3rd of August. Thick envelope, state seal, embossed. I opened it standing up in the hallway of my building with my keys still in the door. Final agency decision, formal hearing, Administrative Process Act. The hearing officer's recommendation adopted in full. The finding of misappropriation of resident property was reversed as unfounded. The annotation was ordered removed from the Virginia Nurse Aid Registry, copies to the Board of Nursing and to the Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. I read it twice in the hallway. Then I sat down on the 3rd stair with the pages on my knees. I want to tell you, I felt something enormous. Here's what actually went through my head. In order. It killed a piece of paper. It did not put the roof back over my grandfather's tool chest. It did not put $14 an hour back in my pocket, or 91 residents back in my week. It did not walk me through a keypad door in Glen Allen. And it did not give my grandmother back one of the 371 days. I went upstairs and made coffee and filed a complaint that afternoon with the Department of Health Professions against a licensed clinical social worker, attaching the 2 sworn reports with the different hour counts. 15 minutes on their online form. Then I put the state's letter in the shoebox with everything else, and I did not send a copy to my sister. She had a hearing on the 18th. Her petition was built on that finding in 7 places. Her lawyer was going to bill her for 2 more weeks of a building with the floor already out of it, and I was going to let him. On the 6th of August, Sheila Bagby from across the street sent me 2 photographs. She still had my number from the year the water heater went. She sent them without a message, which is how neighbors tell you something is wrong. 2 men in the yard on Kenmore Road with a tape measure across the front porch. Clipboard. One of them in a polo with a small logo I recognized from the county planning file. In the second photo, the one taken a minute later, one of them is standing on the seat of my grandmother's rocking chair, up on his toes, reaching for the edge of the porch roof. The nylon is still taped around it. He'd put a work boot on the cushion my grandfather recovered in 1998 and used it as a stepladder to measure a gutter for a company that had already been paying rent for 3 months. Envelope number 14 came back the following Tuesday, 5 days behind the photographs. Purple stamp, crooked, my handwriting under it. I took the lid off the shoebox and put it in with the others, and the card edge made a sound going in. That soft board-on-board click a full box makes. 14. I stood there with my hand on the lid and counted them again anyway. The way you count money, you already know the total of. The Friday before that, the 7th, Corinne Stull had filed her supplemental report ahead of the hearing. I didn't see it. A guardian ad litem doesn't clear her filings with the petitioner and shouldn't. But I know what was in it now. And one of the attachments was a copy of a final agency decision dated the 3rd of August, obtained from the Virginia Department of Health's Office of Licensure and Certification in the ordinary course of her investigation. And under the rules, when you file something in a pending matter, you serve a copy on counsel of record for every party. Which means that at some point on Friday afternoon or Monday morning, in an office in a strip center off Broad Street, a man in a golf shirt opened an envelope from the court's officer and found out that the load-bearing paragraph of the petition he had drafted, and signed, and filed, had been vacated by the Commonwealth of Virginia 5 days earlier. I knew none of that on Friday night when my phone rang. "Dad's coming up Sunday," Danielle said. "Come eat. At Grandma's, it's the only table big enough. Just family. Just family." I said yes. And then I stood in my kitchen for a minute with the phone still in my hand, because she had never once in 14 months invited me to anything, and because in the background of that call I'd heard her typing. I thought she was setting a trap. I was right. I had the direction wrong. You know how the dinner went. Now you know why it went that way. I asked for the exhibit list because a list tells you what a filing is standing on. I counted the 7 references because 7 is how deep the rot goes when the beam is already gone. I asked for an unsigned copy of the whole packet because a packet nobody has signed can be filed as an exhibit later by anybody who has one. He went down the tabs twice. First pass, looking for the finding. Second pass, looking for anything else in 22 pages that could carry the weight without it. There wasn't anything, because his client had built the entire thing out of one sentence about her sister. 4 minutes on the porch, and the boards only moved under one set of shoes. He didn't tell me why. Lawyers can't. He told me not to sign anything, which is the most he could say without breaching a duty to the woman still paying him. And then he took his own filing off my grandmother's table and left the pen. On Monday morning, the 10th, 2 documents went into the file. A motion for leave to withdraw as counsel, citing a fundamental disagreement with the client regarding the factual basis of a pending pleading, and a motion to continue the hearing on the 18th. The court granted the first one. On the second one, the docket said 4 words. Motion denied. Matter proceeds. Corinne Stoll's preliminary report reached me on the 11th. 22 pages, and I read them standing at the kitchen counter and never sat down. The county's file on the 2025 report contained 1 collateral witness. 1. A person interviewed by the investigator, who described the granddaughter as difficult about money and stated she had personally observed concerning behavior in the home. Charmaine Ott, activities coordinator, Larkspur Ridge. She had never been in my grandmother's home. My grandmother did not move into that building until 3 weeks after that phone call. In June of last year, Charmaine Ott and I had never occupied the same room in our lives. The next paragraph was the accounting. 14 disbursements, 1 a month, $500 each, from the protected person's funds, coded companion services. Payee, C. Ott, $7,000. My grandmother paid out of her own account at $6,800 a month for the woman who kept her granddaughter's name off the list and told a lobby full of strangers that she'd asked to be left alone. The last line of that section had no adjectives in it at all. The protected person has not been interviewed regarding any of the foregoing. I found Charmaine Ott in the Wawa lot off Mountain Road at the end of her shift, because Ms. Stoll's report had her employer and anybody can wait in a parking lot. She saw me coming and put both hands on the wheel. I did not open with the $7,000. I want to be honest that I had a version in the car where I did. I'm not here to yell at you, I said. I already know the numbers. So does the court's attorney. She started to say something about how she just does activities. 44 years old and you've got a girl in her first year at Reynolds, I said. That's on your desk, in a frame. You can see it from the lobby. She looked at me then. I'm not going to ask anybody to put your name on a list. Not the county, not the registry, nothing that follows you into a building for the rest of your life. I know exactly what that costs. I've been paying it since July of last year. She cried in a way that people do when they have been waiting a long time to be caught. I told her the only thing I wanted, not an apology. A sworn statement to the guardian ad litem, with her signature and a notary, describing what she'd been asked to do and who had asked her. She said Danielle would ruin her. I said Danielle was going to be busy. She signed it on the 12th, in a bank branch on Staples Mill, and she called Mrs. Stoll herself to say it was coming, which I had not asked her to do. There are people in this story who did a wrong thing for money. There is one who did it for $500 a month more than she makes, and a boss who used the word confidential a lot. I decided which of those I was going to spend my $38 on. The affidavit ran 3 pages and I read it in my car outside the Reynolds campus lot. With the dome light on, waiting to make a shift change. She had been asked to keep the visitor list tight. Those were the words. To note it in an incident log if the granddaughter with the license problem showed up at the desk. To route any card or package addressed to the resident to the responsible party rather than the resident's room, as a matter of resident privacy. Payment came by transfer once a month, with a memo line that said, companion, She confirmed she had never been inside my grandmother's home, and that she had never spoken to me until the 6th of July, though she had been told to watch the desk for me since the previous summer. Then, at the bottom, above the notary block, was a paragraph nobody had asked her for. Ms. Stull told me later she'd tried to leave it out and Ott insisted. For the first 4 months, the resident asked about her granddaughter Toni almost every week. She asked at breakfast, and she asked at the desk, and she asked me twice during hymns. After that, she stopped asking. I read that paragraph maybe 9 times. The dome light in my car goes off by itself after a while, and I kept opening the door to bring it back. She stopped asking. Every certified envelope that came back with the purple stamp, I had read as a door closing. It was a door closing. I had the wrong idea about who was standing on the other side of it, and about what she'd been told was out here. The car got cold. I let the light go off. On the 13th, a law firm in Innsbruck wrote to the Commissioner of Accounts on behalf of Halvard Group Homes. Their client, the letter said, had entered a lease in good faith with a person representing herself as having full authority over the property. Their client had since been advised that the property is held in a life estate, that a lease granted by the life tenant's fiduciary terminates upon the death of the life tenant, and that no remainder man had joined in the instrument. Their client wished to terminate and to be relieved of any claim. Attached, as good faith disclosure, were 4 things: the lease, and 3 transfer confirmations: the 1st of May, the 1st of June, the 1st of July, $2,450 each, $7,350, into an account ending in the same 4 digits I'd matched off a text message about a roof. Not the estate account, not a fiduciary account, hers. Trace it back, and it's a wire-legged sign in a front yard at 6:45 in the morning. I photographed a sign and looked up a public planning file and put 4 lines about it in a petition with a $38 fee, and a courts officer got a summons issued, and the summons went to a company with a lawyer, and a company with a lawyer does not go down with anybody. She rented out an empty house to fund a filing that said the house was killing her. The same week, my Aunt Loretta called me from Dayton for the first time since my mother's service. She'd gotten an overnight envelope. Inside, it was a consent to sale and a deed of her remainder interest, tabbed where she was supposed to sign, with a sticky note on the front in my sister's handwriting. The note said the family had all agreed and that Toni had already signed hers. My aunt is 71 and she does not like the telephone, and she called anyway, because something about the sticky note bothered her enough to look up a niece she hadn't spoken to in 6 years. I told her I had not signed anything. I told her there was a summons out of the Commissioner of Accounts with her name in the distribution list, and that if she waited 3 days, her copy would arrive on its own, and she could read it without anybody's note on the front. She was quiet for a second. "Shh. She told me at Christmas 2 years ago that you'd moved up here," she said. "She asked me if you were staying with me. She asked how you were settling in." Dayton. Where I have never spent a night in my life. She had been building that answer in 2 directions at once for 2 years, telling an old woman in Virginia that I was in Ohio, and telling Ohio that I was on my way. 5 days before a hearing on her own removal, under a document summons, my sister put a misrepresentation in writing on a sticky note and paid overnight postage to send it across a state line to a 4th remainder man. I asked my aunt to keep the envelope. All of it, the note, the tab flags, the air bill. She said she'd put it in a freezer bag, which she did. Then the line clicked over to my other ear, and it was the warehouse, calling to ask if I could take a second shift. My father drove up from Danville on the 14th, and parked in the transmission shop lot, and would not come upstairs. So we sat in his truck with the windows down. 63 years old, ball cap, hands like a man who used to lay brick, and he could not look at the windshield and me at the same time. "There was a form last summer," he said, "waiver of notice and consent. She brought it by with a couple other things. Did you read it? She said it was just paperwork. That form is the reason there was no hearing anybody had to be told about. Sign a waiver of notice and you tell a court that you don't need to be informed and you don't object. one signature from the only other person on the notice list, and an emergency petition walked straight through on a nurse practitioner's 20 minutes. He asked me what he should do. There was a version of me that would have made it easy for him. She'd have said it wasn't his fault, that he was grieving, that Danielle does this to everybody. I didn't say any of that, because it isn't true that it wasn't his fault, and because my grandmother spent 4 months asking a stranger at a breakfast table where I was. Tuesday, I said. 3rd floor, room 3B, 9 o'clock. Tell them you signed something you didn't read. Then I got out and went inside. From my window, I could see the truck for a long time after that, still parked, still not running. She came to my door on the 15th. 600 square feet, one door, a hallway that smells like the dryer vent. She'd never seen the inside of it. She stood on the mat, and she did not come in, and she started in the warm voice. Then she got to it. Do you understand what a consent order does to a clinical license? 20 years. My whole career. She let that sit. You're going to put your own sister's name on that kind of list. That's what you want. I didn't answer. Tony. Softer. The softest she had been with me since our mother's funeral. Withdraw the petition. Just the petition. I'll call the building in the morning and you'll be on the visitor list by lunch. You can see her tomorrow. There it is. For 383 days, the only thing I had wanted in the world was a keypad door opening. She had been sitting on it the entire time, knowing exactly what it was worth to me, and she waited until 3 days before a hearing to put a price on it. That's the moment I understood the thing I'd been circling since June of last year. She never took the house. The house was a bonus. What she took was access, and she kept it in her pocket, and she spent it whenever she needed me quiet. No, I said. She waited for the rest of the sentence. There wasn't one. I shut the door with my hand still flat on it, and I stood there a while before I moved. The Commissioner of Accounts filed his report on the 16th. I read it standing at the clerk's counter in the courthouse with people filing behind me, because I couldn't wait to get to the car. Deficiency in the accounting. Rental income received and not disclosed. Care coordination hours claimed without contemporaneous records or vouchers of any kind. Disbursements to a third party without documentation of services. He recommended the court issue a rule to show cause why the fiduciary should not be surcharged for the full amount of the loss with interest, and he noted, in one dry sentence, that the fiduciary's own submission of hours could not be reconciled with the facility's records. And then, on page 9, in the schedule of estate expenses, a line I was not ready for. Personal effects removed from residence, no value assigned. Underneath it, an invoice, a self-storage facility in Sandston, $94 a month, paid out of my grandmother's account since March. Her mother's dresser, the iron bed, the hat box with the rubber band around it. Not sold, not thrown out. Boxed up, driven 12 miles, and locked in a metal unit that the woman they belonged to was paying rent on every month without knowing it. I stood at that counter and thought about the porch, and the nylon, and the boot on the cushion, and how none of it had ever been about a house at all. On the 17th, the court permitted a supervised visit ahead of the hearing. Ms. Stull met me in the lobby. The receptionist turned the guest book around. Date, printed name, resident visiting, time in. Relationship. I stood there with the pen and that empty column, and I could not make my hand go for a second. 14 months of purple ink and one lobby and 3 seconds of believing her. I wrote granddaughter. They took us to a sunroom at the end of the hall with a fish tank and vinyl chairs. She was in the second chair from the window with an Afghan on her knees, and she was small in a way that 85 is not automatically small. I had imagined that moment maybe 400 times, always the same way. Her face opening, her saying my name the way she does, twice. That is not what happened. She looked up and she knew me right away. That part I got right. And what came across her face was not joy. It was the look you give somebody who finally shows up. After. Well, she said, there she is. I sat down and I couldn't get anything out. And she let me not get it out. And then she turned her head toward the aide by the door. "Honey," she said, "get me my folder, the green one in my drawer." Inside the folder were her Medicare cards, a church bulletin, 2 photographs of my grandfather, and 1 page of unlined paper in her own handwriting. Dated the 21st of December. I know that hand. It shakes on the downstrokes now, and it never used to. And I know the day, because it's in the accounting too, in the mileage log. My sister was there on the 21st of December with a stack of Christmas cards for the residents to sign. The page said she did not wish to receive contact from her granddaughter, who had moved out of state, and asked to be left alone, and that she asked her daughter to handle her mail so she wouldn't be upset by it. Signed. Her name. The whole thing. The way she signs a check. "She told me you went up to Ohio with Loretta," my grandmother said. "She said you got a good job up there and you wanted a clean start. She said the letters were people wanting money." She smoothed the page flat on her knee with 2 fingers the way she used to smooth a tablecloth. "I signed it because I didn't want you to feel bad," she said, "about not coming." The fish tank hummed. Somewhere down the hall a television was doing a game show. "You never went to Ohio," she said. "My sister did not steal a house from an old woman. She stole an old woman from me, 12 miles away, 1 signature at a time, and then billed that old woman $65 an hour for the hours it took her to do it." We sat there 30 more minutes and mostly did not talk. The room smelled like warm towels. She asked about the weather twice, and I told her twice, and both times she nodded like it was new, and I did not correct her, because there is nothing on this earth that has to be corrected. Then I did the coldest thing I have ever done. I went out to the lobby, and I gave Corinne Stoll the shoebox. All of it. 14 certified receipts stapled inside the lid, the envelopes with the purple stamps, page 38, the padlock photographs, the planning file, the spreadsheet. I asked her to have it marked as an exhibit. I took one out first. Number 9, the 6th of March, the one I'd done long division on the back of in a parking lot at 6 in the morning. I slid it open along the top with my thumb and asked Ms. Stoll to walk it down the hall and put it in my grandmother's hands, and to say who it was from. And then I told her how to do it. "Not all at once," I said. "Don't hand up the box. 6 of them. In order. Oldest first. And have the clerk read out the number I wrote on the corner and the date on the postmark, out loud, one at a time, before anybody says a word about what's inside." She looked at me for a second longer than a lawyer looks at a client's sister. "6, she said. "6, I said. "The room needs to hear them land. Tuesday the 18th of August, courtroom 3B, 9 o'clock, 3rd floor." My sister sat at counsel table with a substitute lawyer who had been in the case for 6 days. He had 2 banker's boxes and a legal pad, and he kept turning to her mid-sentence to ask what something was. My father sat behind me in the 3rd row in a suit jacket over a work shirt. The commissioner's report went in first. The judge had it. The judge had clearly read it, and she read parts of it out loud anyway, which I have since learned is a thing judges do when they want a record to exist. Then Corinne Stoll stood up and said she had one more matter for the court, obtained from the fiduciary under the commissioner's summons for documents relating to the protected person's correspondence and effects. She said it was recovered from the desk in the fiduciary's home office. The clerk carried up a clear plastic sleeve. 14 envelopes. Plain white. My handwriting on every one of them. Stamped, addressed to Larkspur Ridge, arranged in order by postmark. Not one of them opened. Not thrown away. Not returned. Not refused. Every month for 14 months, one came back to me with purple ink on it, and one went into a drawer 12 miles from the woman it was written to, and stayed there, sealed, while she sat in a sunroom and stopped asking about me. Ms. Stoll handed them up one at a time, and the clerk read them into the record. She staged them the way I'd asked her to stage mine. Number 1, postmarked the 25th of July. Number 3, postmarked the 6th of September. Number 7, the 6th of January. Number 9, the 6th of March. Number 11, the 6th of May. Number 14, the 6th of August. By the fourth one, you could hear the air handler in the ceiling. By the sixth, nobody in that room was looking at the envelopes anymore. They were all looking at the same place, and it was not at me. The judge did not raise her voice once, and it took 11 minutes. Both appointments were removed, guardian and conservator, effective immediately. A neutral fiduciary from the court's list was appointed in place of both, with authority to take possession of all property and records within 72 hours. The lease to Halvard Group Homes was declared void, as beyond the fiduciary's authority. The petition to sell the real estate was denied. The surety company that wrote the conservator's bond was ordered notified that day, because a bond exists exactly for this. The company pays the estate what's missing, and then the company goes after the person who signed for it, personally, for the rest of her natural life, if it has to. All fiduciary commissions and fees were disallowed in full, retroactive to the appointment. Every dollar of the 712 hours, and the 412 and the 538 it had grown out of, gone as if she had never claimed them. And a rule to show cause was issued on the deficiency, returnable in 30 days. My sister stood up somewhere in the middle of that. She said the court was not being given the full picture. She said this was a family matter that had gotten out of hand and that she had a 20-year career in this field. And she said the word context 3 times. The judge let her finish. Every word of it. She did not lift a hand or say counsel or reach for the gavel, and the court reporter typed all of it down, and when my sister ran out of sentences, the judge looked at her page and read the next item on it. 14 months my sister spent making sure no room like that would ever have to hear me. She got the room. Nobody in it needed her to explain. When the judge came to the end of her list, I stood up. I asked to be heard. She said briefly, "Ms. Dillard." I said my name first, out loud, because I wanted it on the record in my own voice. Then I said one thing. I asked the court to take notice of a document already in the Guardian ad litem supplemental filing, a final agency decision of the Commonwealth of Virginia, dated the 3rd of August, reversing as unfounded the finding of misappropriation entered against me in July of last year, and directing that the annotation be removed from the nurse aid registry. I said that finding was the stated basis for omitting me from the notice list. I said it was cited 7 times in the petition to sell. I said it was the reason given to a licensed facility for keeping my name off a visitor list for 386 days. I said thank you, and I sat down. 41 seconds. I know because Ms. Stull timed it, out of habit, and told me in the hall after. Not one adjective in it. Not one word about my sister. And for the first time in 14 months, somebody in an official room said my name out loud without the word alleged in front of it. The judge made a note. Then she said, "Ms. Dillard, stay where you are. Your grandmother has asked to address the court." She came in through the side door with Corinne Stull's hand under her elbow and a court services officer carrying a chair for her. The judge explained gently that she would be heard for a limited purpose and that the guardian ad litem would remain beside her. She had the envelope with her. Number 9, the 6th of March, opened along the top with my thumb the day before. The only one out of 14 that had ever gotten from my hand to hers. She read 2 sentences off it. The part about the man at the laundromat who does the crossword in pen, and the part where I told her the crocuses were up along the fence, and that I'd be there when I could. Then she folded it and asked the court for 3 things. She asked that the house on Kenmore Road be sold. She said she was never going back into it and she would not have her family fight over an empty building for another year, and she asked to voluntarily release her life estate so the sale could go through clean. She asked that her share of the proceeds be split 3 ways. 1 part to her granddaughter Toni, 1 part to her son Ray and her daughter Loretta together, and 1 part to be paid into the local bar association's guardianship program to fund a guardian ad litem for old people in this county who don't have anybody coming, so that somebody gets appointed to them before 14 months go by. The judge asked whether she understood that the 4th remainder share belonged to her granddaughter Danielle. My grandmother said she understood it, and that she'd been told the court would be holding that one for a while. She was not finished, and what she asked for next took the air out of me. She asked the court not to send my sister to prison. She said she understood there would be another judge for that part. She asked that when the time came, that judge consider a suspended sentence instead of the top of the range. She asked that her letter be given to whoever makes that decision, and she said she would write it out herself if somebody would bring her a pen that worked. I had spent 14 months earning the right to a room like that. I had a shoebox, a filing fee, 386 days, and about 2 minutes of feeling like the sharpest thing in the building. And my grandmother, 85 years old, in a borrowed chair, reached over and took the knife back off the table before anybody could pick it up. Then she turned in her chair to look at my sister. She did not raise her voice. Her hands did not shake, and I was watching for it. "You're still my granddaughter," she said, "but I'm not waiting on you anymore." That was all of it. Nothing about the money, nothing about the room they emptied, nothing about a page in December among the Christmas cards. She turned back the other way and found me in the second row. "I thought you left me, baby," she said. "I'm sorry." Behind the table, my sister sat down. Nobody had told her to. Her lawyer was still standing, and she sat down anyway, the way you do when your legs make the decision. I put both hands flat on the bench in front of me and looked at the seal on the wall until it stopped moving. The judge went back on the record and finished. The file was referred to the Commonwealth's attorney for Henrico County for review on the accounting and separately on the sworn reports. A copy of the order was directed to the Department of Health Professions for the Board of Social Work. Restitution was set, $3,200, transferred out in June of last year. $7,350 in rent taken on a property that was not hers to let. $19,500 in hours that could not be reconciled with a sign-in book. 300 hours at $65, the difference between what a spreadsheet claimed and what a building's own log could show, plus interest from the date of each, plus the balance of the disallowed commissions, to be surcharged on the return of the rule to show cause, plus attorneys' fees and costs, under the statute the Commonwealth of Virginia keeps for the financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. The surety would be notified and would satisfy the estate, and would then look to my sister personally. Then the neutral fiduciary asked the court's permission to address one administrative matter before the docket closed. He asked whether the protected person's granddaughter, Toni Dillard, consented to be designated a preferred visitor and emergency contact. I said yes. The judge said, "For the clerk's record, Ms. Dillard, state your relationship to the protected person." One word. Granddaughter. The column that had been blank at the top of that podium since June of last year got filled in out loud in a courtroom by a woman in a black robe who wrote it down. 11 weeks later, here is where everybody landed. Danielle Vance pleaded guilty in November to embezzlement, a felony, on a loss over $1,000, and to one count of perjury on the sworn annual report. My grandmother's letter was read into the record at sentencing, all of it, in the voice of a stranger. She got a suspended sentence, supervised probation, and a restitution order that will follow her until it is paid to the dollar. The Board of Social Work took her clinical license by consent order. That order is public. Anybody can type her name into the license lookup on a state website and read it in about 9 seconds forever, for free. She is also permanently barred from serving as a fiduciary by appointment of any court in the Commonwealth. 14 months ago, my sister put my name on a state list so I could never again be trusted alone in a room with somebody's grandmother. Her name is on exactly one list now. It's searchable. It's hers. Charmaine Ott lost her job at Larkspur Ridge the week the affidavit was filed, and she repaid the $7,000 in installments to the estate. She was not annotated on any registry. She's finishing a supervised practice plan in a facility in Chesterfield, and the reason is a 2-paragraph letter I wrote to the board, which I have never told her about, and which is the only thing in this entire story I did not put in the shoebox. Halvard Group Homes got their money back. The lease was void from the beginning. The $7,350 came back to the estate out of their escrow, and their special use permit application was withdrawn 2 days after the hearing. The wire-legged sign was gone off the lawn by the end of the month. The man in the golf shirt withdrew and did not send a final bill. The Bar Association received a complaint about a petition filed and prosecuted on a finding that had been vacated by the Commonwealth 5 days before he walked into my grandmother's dining room with it. He took a public reprimand. He also, and I did not ask him to, gave a written statement to the guardian ad litem about what he found when he went down those tabs the second time. My father stood up in that courtroom on the 18th and testified that he signed a waiver of notice and consent without reading it because his daughter told him it was just paperwork. 63 years old, saying that out loud into a microphone with a court reporter typing. He drives up from Danville every Sunday now. He has rebuilt the porch rail on Kenmore Road for the new owners, unpaid, because he said somebody ought to leave that house better than they found it. My Aunt Loretta flew in from Dayton for the sentencing. First time back in 6 years. And the storage unit in Sandston got opened by the neutral fiduciary in September with an inventory clerk present. The iron bed, the dresser from Nottoway County, and the hat box, rubber band still on it. 60 years of photographs dry and fine. The annotation came off the nurse aid registry in August, 3 days after the final decision. My certification was reissued in October. A facility in Ashland called me before I ever sent an application, because a scheduler I used to work with saw my name come back clean on a check she was running for somebody else, and she went and got a phone. My share of the house came to $61,400. I paid off 2 credit cards. I paid my father back for the truck tires. And then I did the thing everybody told me was crazy. I stayed in the 600 square feet behind the transmission shop for another year. It is 12 minutes from where she lives now. She's in a small assisted living place off Mountain Road with 9 residents and a screened porch. In October, the court converted her guardianship to a limited guardianship, which means she makes her own decisions about her day, her mail, her visitors, and her telephone. The neutral fiduciary handles the money and files with the commissioner on time. Mr. Prewitt, who is 90 and who I bathed and shaved twice a week for 2 years before all of this, called the house in November. "They tell me you're licensed again," he said. "When are you coming back?" And my grandmother has a project, which she brings up every single Sunday. That 3rd share is sitting in a fund at the Bar Association now, and she wants to know the name of the first old person in this county who gets a guardian ad litem paid for out of it. She says she'd like to write to them. She says she has some idea what that's like. The first cold morning in November, we sat on the porch on Kenmore Road one last time. The new owners took possession on the 5th, and they let us have the 4th. And the wife brought out 2 folding chairs and then went inside and left us alone, which I think about more than she'll ever know. I brought a box cutter. The nylon came off the rocking chair in one long piece, 14 months of it, gone brittle, the tape yellowed into the arms. I cut it down the back and peeled it away and folded it up small and put it in a trash bag, and underneath, the cushion my grandfather recovered in 1998 was exactly the color it was the day he did it. There's still a gray mark on the wood where the tape was. There's going to be. She sat in it. I sat on the top step with my coffee, and she rocked, and across the road the Bagby's maple was down to about a dozen leaves. "Your granddaddy would have hated all that paperwork," she said. "He'd have signed every page of it without reading." She laughed at that. She held her cup with both hands the way I do. The shoebox is still on the shelf above my coats. There are 13 envelopes in it now. The 9th one lives in the drawer of her nightstand, opened on top, where she can reach it without getting up. "Here's what I've got, if it's worth anything to you. For 14 months I believed the way you win something like this is by being loud enough, or right enough, or by finding the one person with a desk who would finally look at me and see somebody honest. Nobody was ever going to look at me. That is not what desks are for. Paper doesn't know who the good person is. It doesn't care who cried, or who bathed her 5 days a week for 3 years, or who showed up at Thanksgiving with a camera. Paper only knows who filed. My sister understood that a year before I did, and she used it. And the only thing that ever beat her was somebody being just as patient about it and telling the truth on every page. So let me ask you the thing I said I'd ask. Is there a shoebox somewhere in your house? Letters that came back? Or a folder you keep meaning to take to somebody? Or a phone number you stopped dialing because you decided you already knew what the silence meant? How long have you had it now? Because I was 3 seconds from believing a stranger in a lobby about a woman who raised me, and I was wrong. And the only reason I ever found that out is that I kept mailing a letter to somebody I was sure had stopped wanting them. Tell me about yours down in the comments. I read them, and lately I've been reading them out on a screened porch off Mountain Road with an 85-year-old woman who wants to know what everybody's names are. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. Take care of the old people who are quiet lately, and I'll see you in the next story.